Welcome to Talking Leadership. This is Eric Perez. Thanks for joining me again on the podcast. And today is the second edition of what I'm calling the global edition of the podcast. Again, I hope you enjoy the content, and today's podcast was especially interesting for me given that I'm not an entrepreneur, and today's guest really gives a detailed insight into his thinking around what entrepreneurialism means to him. And by way of introduction, today's guest is best known as the founder of Digital Tutors. He is also a member and past president of the Oklahoma City chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization. I'd like to welcome to the podcast Piyush Patel.
Good to be here with you.
Mate, look, I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are as an entrepreneur, and my interest in this area is growing by the day, particularly as I talk to entrepreneurs from around the place. So can I ask you, as a starting point, I guess, to the conversation, what was your pathway to becoming an entrepreneur, and what was it in the environment that you were working in that motivated you to take that step to do it for yourself?
You know, I'm probably just like a lot of other entrepreneurs in that I'm too stubborn to just go with the flow, and I am too arrogant to think of course I can do it better, right? I mean, all entrepreneurs have a little bit of this delusionality, narcissism, ignorance, right? And so for me, it really was, I think I can do this better than everybody else that's out there. Mind you, I was a sixth grade science teacher, and it's really hard to raise a family as a sixth grade science teacher. And so what I did was I worked at night at a TV studio. So I'd teach all day and then work at night and work weekends. And I really wanted to be an animator, but they were like, oh, you can't go in there. You can't go in there. And I begged and begged and begged and finally said, okay, when it's empty Sunday afternoon, you can go in there. And so I did. And I opened the first little manual and it said, select the vertices and create a cluster. And I was like, whoa, what the hell is a vertice? You know? And it was that light bulb moment that, hey, if I can figure this out, I bet there's other people just like me who want to be in animation and visual effects, but there's nobody to teach you. And at the time, you got to remember, this is like 98, 99. You had to, pack up your stuff and go to UCLA or go to Vancouver Film School. I mean, there were very few places in the world where you could go become an animator. And so I just started teaching people online. I became a college professor teaching advanced computer graphics, and gosh, the rest was history. It just kind of took off.
Can I ask again, and I'm interested because you said you were a teacher to start with. Did the hint of this happen while you were teaching, or have you, even before you got into the profession of teaching, which is an honorable profession, obviously, that animation and digital technology was something that fascinated you, or did that come later in your life?
Well, I mean, I grew up as a Star Wars kid, so I think everybody in that generation who grew up as a Star Wars kid is just mesmerized, right? I mean, this is magic on the screen. I wanted to be part of that magic on the screen. It's funny, you look back, and it's like, when was that tipping point? For me, it was fourth grade. I can tell you to the day. My father said to me, if you bring home all A's, we will buy you an Atari. And I worked hard, and I'm not an A student. I'm not even a B student. I just, school's not my thing. It's funny, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher because I want to connect with kids differently than the teachers that connected with me. But I worked hard. I brought home all A's and an A minus. And my dad said, that's not all A's. And I said, no, see, they're all A's. He's like, no, but this minus, that's not an all A. Now, in hindsight, my dad would now tell you, son, it didn't matter if you brought home all A's all year long. We couldn't afford an Atari, so you weren't ever going to get one. But they never told me that. They told me that now as an adult, right? But as a kid, this drive of, oh yeah, I'm going to buy my own Atari. And better than that, I'm going to make my own games. And I am just going to do my own thing because I can't trust somebody to do it for me. And I that was that moment where I was like, I'm going to go kind of pave my own way.
Yeah, it sounds like whatever drives the entrepreneur, and there can be many motivations for why people become an entrepreneur. I think in what you've described there, and tell me if I'm on the wrong track here, that even in your pathway to becoming a teacher, you saw a need that was different to the one that you were accessing as a kid. So you wanted to connect with kids differently. And as far as entrepreneurialness goes, in that sense, you did something different than that you'd experienced before. And I guess that has obviously transferred over to what you're doing now, and that you went from teaching to being a university college professor to now founding your own organization and businesses and now helping others to do the same. So it's quite you can see the connectedness there. I guess it takes an idiot like myself to ask that simple question and get the detailed answer, because sometimes when you're looking, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, when you're looking from the outsider perspective, which I bring to the conversation, I only see what I see now. You don't see the depth to the picture, and that's sometimes why these conversations need to happen. And if the podcast listeners are listening to this, and be inspired, because you could be sitting in a classroom as a teacher, you could be working in a factory doing whatever. In theory, there should be nothing from stopping you doing that. And I guess one of the things that we'll talk about a bit later is what are those capabilities, those intrinsic things that make you a good entrepreneur. But when we get to that, I'll ask that question. So please remind me if I forget. Let me ask you this. Do you see in your travels, and obviously you've dealt with lots of organizational leaders and entrepreneurs in your travels, is there a difference between the leadership function and entrepreneurs? Do you see a difference?
That's a really tough question, and I'm curious to hear kind of, you've done a number of these podcasts, so I'd love to hear kind of your summation of what others have had to say. But if I take a stab at it, entrepreneurs find a need in the market and fulfill a need in the market. Leadership is how we do it, right? We have to lead other people to accomplish that. And there's a huge difference between, I'm a solo entrepreneur, I have my own little service or whatever product business, and I am myself. And so I am chief everything, right? Once you kind of get past 2 or 3 employees and you realize, wow, I've got to motivate people, I've got to lead people to accomplish the things I need them to accomplish to reach the goals I've set for myself, well, that's totally different to me, right? We could all be entrepreneurs, but leadership is very different. And then you've got leadership within the ranks, which is different in itself, I feel. So I don't know, tell me what you've found in some of your discussions with other entrepreneurs.
Look, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of what I've been finding is that distinction is nuanced and there's a bit of grey there. So if I took, by way of comparison, a leader in an organization who is working for a salary or a wage versus an entrepreneur that has to generate that for him or herself, I think the motivation to be a leader in those contexts are very different. So that a leader in an organization doesn't necessarily have to worry to the degree that if the comparison was you might take a general manager in a multinational company, it's not going to be on him or her if the company fails or succeeds. They go there, they do a job, they have to fulfill a strategic vision, or they have to do something to enable the organization to progress. But if that person was out of the game for 2 or 3 weeks, the organization will still exist. With an entrepreneur, if you take your eyes off that prize for any length of time and it's your business and it's your investment of time and energy, I think that's where some of the differences lie in degree of ownership and connectedness to the business. I'm not saying that a leader who's not an entrepreneur doesn't have that in large amounts, but I think the connection to the entrepreneur in the business is your baby, it's your creation. You will have a different level of connectedness to it. And I may need to tweak that question a little bit, but I think in my mind there is a distinction between the two. If I took a leader from any other industry and compared them to an entrepreneur who is leading as well, I think there would be several different capabilities and differences in how they operate. My perspective. What does that ring true for you? Not true for you?
Yeah, I'll give you a real simple analogy. Entrepreneurs are parents and leaders are caregivers. They both have a common interest. They both have a responsibility, but it's very different as a parent versus a caregiver when you're talking about your child.
That's probably the easiest way to put it. Yes, it's a nice way to sum it up. Yeah, that they both have the same interests, but yeah, no, I can agree with that. So let me ask you this, and I'm not trying to take this to the negative, but I need to ask this as part of the discussion about being an entrepreneur and what that means. What's the most difficult part for you about being an entrepreneur?
I think the most difficult part for me is I can't turn it off. and most of my friends who are in this world that do the same thing, they can't turn it off either. And, it's so funny. After I sold my company, and for your listeners, and we talked, just I want to go back one step. For your listeners, and you talked about inspiration, I started with $54 and no investors, no debt, no other shareholders, just me and my wife. And we got that up to 10 million in revenue at 65% EBITDA, and then sold it for 45 million in cash. So if a sixth grade science teacher can do it with no help and no outside investors, your listeners can definitely do it, right? So I want to kind of package that up and say, listen, I'm just a sixth grade and middle school science teacher, right? Like I'm not a super genius. If I could figure it out, your listeners could definitely figure it out. All right, so let's kind of step forward now. After I sold my business, I told my wife, we're now been married 21 years, but she was with me from day one. I said, I've been cheating on you this whole time. And she looked at me. She's like, well, what? I said, yeah. I said, this business was my mistress. And when she needed me, I had to go. Oh, you and my son, like you guys are fine. I mean, look at all these employees that need me and these customers that need me. And I realized I worked 7 days a week. I thought about it in the shower. I thought about it before I went to sleep. I would dream about the business. I mean, it consumed my life. Now, I had a very positive outcome, but I'll be honest with you, and maybe some of your listeners have gone through this. I also would have gone off the deep end and spent every last penny trying to keep this thing alive. And so a lot of people have told me since I've sold my company, they're like, look, your business really is your mistress. And if you let it, it will bleed you dry from your cash, from your family and your friends, and you'll be left with nothing. And I thought, wow. And now I look at my friends who also own businesses who are in the thick of it, and they skip their kids' stuff. They skip their, spouse's birthdays because they have something going on. They have to run to the office. They miss anniversaries. They miss key important things. So for me, this whole COVID thing, there has been a silver lining. And that has been, I've been forced to stay home and pause and stop traveling. And it's like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I enjoyed being around my family and cooking dinner for everybody and, hanging out. Turning it off is hard. I think that's, the quick answer to you. It's just hard. It's hard to turn it off.
Look, I appreciate you sharing that. That's it's quite an insight into your journey as an entrepreneur. And for me, I think what you've just said there is applicable to most leaders in any organizational setting, in any industry, that if you can't find a balance, or if you let it, your work can consume you. You could be an academic, you could be a volunteer, you could be volunteering at the local hospital. If that's all you ever do and that's all you ever think about, then if it starts becoming something that is to the detriment of your family life, it can be quite a negative thing. That said, it depends on the stage of life that you become a leader or an entrepreneur. So if you had done this before you'd met your now wife, and you're a single man and you were devoting your time ruthlessly to getting this thing off the ground, the only person that is out of balance and out of whack there is yourself. And then you can critique yourself and you do whatever you need to do to make that right. But when others come into the picture, it makes this leadership question and why you do what you do more nuanced when you've got a family or other circumstances. And I think that cuts across leaders of all types. So balance, I think you would agree, is important. And for someone who works from home, so I've been a home-based person for the last 6 odd years. I've seen my kids grow up and I've been at home to see that. Not many people get that flexibility in their jobs, so I'm grateful for it. And I've seen some very positive things in the media and social media, as well as some negative about being at home. I wish I was back at work. Maybe you've missed the point of some of the being at home. And if you've got your kids around you, that they're can be just as important. It should be maybe more important than worrying about the job. Now, like you said, you had a very positive outcome, but you can't claw that time back. So I can understand where you're coming from. So let's move now to the positive. How do you measure success as an entrepreneur?
When your customers are happy, to me, that's success. I used to only focus on my employees, and then I only focused on my customers. And I quickly realized that if my customers are happy, my employees are happy. If my employees are happy, my customers are happy. And so I stopped measuring success in terms of money. I stopped measuring it in how many things we sold. I started measuring it, are we making our customers happy? If we are, then we're selling stuff. If they're unhappy, then we're selling stuff that's broken, and we should stop doing that. We should fix the things that we are selling. So I really dialed into, are my customers happy? Are my employees happy? If those things are rocking, we're making money.
Interesting how one feeds into the other. And also I need to just unpack one thing you said there, that money wasn't the metric that you used to measure success. Yet again, from an outsider perspective, when you look at entrepreneurs, my theory was always, well, they're only out to make money and that's their only driver. If that's your only driver, I guess that's a potential recipe for calamity, not necessarily for success.
You're going to have the hours I worked. I would have made more money during the hard years working at McDonald's. There's nothing wrong with working at McDonald's. If I was to work 80 hours, I'd make a lot of money, but when you work 80 hours and you're still not making money, that's when it gets really hard, right? Yeah. So then you have to really go back to purpose. What am I doing this for, right? Is it really about the money, or am I going to go change an entire industry? Am I going to give opportunity? I had 1.5 million students on the Digital Tutors platform. That's 1.5 million people who had an opportunity that I didn't have. And that's what drove me. We're going to go just change the world. We're going to go. Now, when I say change the world, I'm not talking about changing the world for every Tom, Dick, and Harry. I'm talking about changing the world for people who want to become animators who have no other option. Where do you go? I'm going to go change their world. I'm going to give them an opportunity.
Based on the fact that when you were coming up, you didn't have that similar. Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Okay, it's not difficult to see where the motivator came from for you on that, and that's again, it's always interesting. The very personal can be some of the most strongest driving forces to get something done, because obviously sounds like you were. See if I can use the appropriate language here. You were annoyed that you didn't have those opportunities there. Is annoyed? Yeah, let's go with annoyed, because I could use another set of terms, but I won't. And that drove you, and that makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you this: entrepreneur capabilities. If you had to create an entrepreneur from the ground up, what are the capabilities that person? What would he or she need to be effective, successful in that world?
So ultimately, they've got to manage cash. If there's no gas in the tank, you're not going anywhere. So you have to learn to really manage cash and understand money. Just got to understand the money. You got to understand the product inside and out. You got to understand the customer. But I'll tell you, over all of that, if they can just have compassion and empathy and be humble, no matter where their success goes, they're going to have some basic tools to deal with people. For me, I think it all boils down to leadership. You've got to be humble. You got to understand your cash position. You got to understand your product, understand your customer. But ultimately, I sum it all up in this thing called BAM. I write extensively about it in my book. For me, BAM stands for belonging, affirmation, and meaning. That's the only 3 things that people want when they come to work for you. That's the only 3 reasons why people stay working with you. And honestly, I think that's why customers are devout. When you think about an Apple customer who's like, I'm all in on a MacBook, an iPhone, an Apple TV. I got the headphones, like I'm all in. And next year when it all comes out again, I'll buy it all again. Those people want to belong to something bigger than themselves. They want to be affirmed when somebody says, oh, that's an iPhone. Oh, yeah, I'm not an Android guy. I'm an iPhone person, right? And they want to mean something. They want the products to say, oh, look, this product is different. I am different. I'm not generic. So when entrepreneurs can dial into BAM, both with customers and employees, you got an apple on your hands.
I hate when this happens in a podcast, because we could talk about that for many more podcasts, but I'm not going to take up your time doing that. But yeah, look, again, I'll take the perspective as an outsider. You don't often see that as the person coming in, or no, maybe seeing it is not the right terminology, maybe feeling that. So, and to use the Apple analogy, yeah, I've had Apple products for as long as I can remember, and before the Apple iPhone, and now the if we're talking about a product here, because it's so useful and it's like carrying your own mini computer with you wherever you go. Before this, I was a Nokia I was a tragic for the Nokia phones before the smartphone technology came in. And I found myself thinking back on this, and this is how silly a customer can be. But I was thinking, wow, Nokia didn't make the jump, but I love their phones, and I don't want to jump to this new thing, even though people are telling me it's the future and I should be on there. Now that I've had this thing for that many years, I don't see myself ever going back to a different technology. It could be better. Nokia could come out with something better. The Android system could be 10 times better, but I'm stuck with the product that I have some loyalty for. And I guess if it was Steve Jobs, if that's what he was aiming for, then he's got that in spades, because it's the brand sucks you in and makes you feel like you're part of something bigger. So that makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you, I really want to get your perspective on this. Just some statements around entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs are risk takers.
We are not risk takers. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions from the outsiders looking in. We are calculated risk takers. And if the bet looks good and it's weighted in the advantage of the entrepreneur, we're going to take the bet. The risk is we're willing to put the chips out there, knowing we have a high probability of winning. To the outside, it looks like, why would you risk the chips? Why would you do that? I want to bet on myself. I don't think people understand when they have a job. First of all, you're never going to become incredibly successful if you have a job. Your job is to make someone else incredibly successful, right? So everybody that's listening has to kind of understand. So the first step is you got to bet on yourself, right? And right now, if you have a job, somebody's betting on you. So you are a multiplier for them. If they pay you $50,000 a year, they're hoping you generate $150,000 back for them. If you are a risk taker, you're in the riskiest position if you work for somebody, because if you get let go, if the economy is going the way it's going right now, people are out of jobs. But you know who isn't? The entrepreneur, the owner. They're still in the struggle, and they may not have anybody to help them, and that's okay. They're going to run their little shop by themselves until they get enough income to hire some more people and bet on them. So I don't think entrepreneurs are risky. I think we are calculated risk takers. But if you work for somebody, you are the ultimate risk taker, because you're putting your entire future in somebody's hand. It's kind of like, would you rather drive somewhere or be driven somewhere? But you don't know who the driver is going to be. Maybe they have a license, maybe they don't, maybe they've had 20 wrecks, you don't know.
For those of us that do have jobs, that resonates, in a not good way, yeah. But I can see what you're saying. Yes. Entrepreneurs are persistent.
We are very persistent, sometimes to a fault.
Yeah.
I've made some stupid mistakes, stupid bets, right? I had this, feeling that, hey, customers are right. We should do what the customers want. And I had enough customers tell me, Piyush, we need an iPad app. I want an iPad app. Why can't I watch this on the train? I want an iPad app. So we spent $500,000 building this amazing iPhone app or iPad app, and we had a few hundred downloads out of 1.5 million customers. You know what we forgot to do? We forgot to go ask all of our customers, do you own an iPad? And here we are, we listened to a few customers, right? To appease a few, we spent a whole bunch. Turned out we were too early. People didn't have enough iPads in the market to even make an impact for them. So what I started to do is I stopped listening to the customers, but I started watching their behaviors. So I'll give you a real sneaky thing that some of your customers can do. If any of you own a web-based business and you have a search bar, track the metrics on that search bar. So if you call me and said, hey, Piyush, I'm working on a commercial and I need to learn how to make a motorcycle. I'd say, look, you don't need to learn how to make a motorcycle. You want a motorcycle. I'm not going to help you. Right? But if the search bar started filling up with motorcycle rendering, motorcycle animation, we would then take that data back to the team and go, I think the market wants motorcycles, just to kind of sum it up. So what that means is we're going to watch the behavior of our customer and not just their voice, because their actions really speak louder than their words. And I know that sounds cliche, but for us, it really, really dialed in what the customer wants versus what they think they want.
Yeah, that's a different way to look at that, and that's tips and tricks for those that are selling goods, obviously. I guess that would apply too for a service. So if you're providing a service, same metrics applies. What are people looking for as opposed to what do they tell you? And I guess you think back when people talk about their intention to vote for one political party over another, always treat that with some skepticism. And look what happened in your country in 2016. People thought one candidate had it over another and were quite surprised when it flipped on its head and went the other way. Okay, now I can understand that. Here's another one. Entrepreneurs are innovators.
Yes, I would agree with that. And, innovation doesn't have to mean I'm inventing the next big, the new smartphone, right? It's innovating on whatever the customer is currently using to take it one step better, to say, no, you want to spend your money with me. I have a service that's one step better than your current service. And so, yes, I think you have to constantly innovate. If the phone, and we talked about Apple products right earlier. So if that phone never changed and the software never changed and the apps never changed, they're leaving the door open for somebody to come along. And that's what happened with Nokia and Motorola, right? They all figured nothing's going to be better than this. And somebody came right along and said, oh yeah, how about this? Whoa, you don't need a keypad? What's going on here? And I was working with Motorola at the time when the iPhone came out, and they pretty much said, scrap everything we've done, throw it away. None of this is going to work anymore. And they almost died.
Wow.
It was a big ship to turn around. So yeah, I do think entrepreneurs are innovators. And I classify somebody who owns a tea shop as an entrepreneur, right? If you sell tea and you're a business, you're an entrepreneur. The fact that they could be innovative enough to say, hey, how do I sell my excess inventory, and maybe I build a subscription service to my customers who don't come every day. That's what I'm talking about, right? How do we innovate on this very simple business called a tea shop, right?
Yeah, almost value adding to your product or your service, like you're saying before. Yeah, okay. Entrepreneurs are strategic thinkers.
Absolutely.
What is it about strategic thinking that you think is critical for the entrepreneur? And I might ask you this in two parts: early stage entrepreneurialism, and then once you're established, what does strategic thinking mean? Because I would think, and I'm drawing on my vast knowledge of my podcast here from some very very smart people, that to me painted a picture that it's a continuum and it can grow over time, and there's an automatic flexibility to good strategic thinking, in that if one pathway doesn't work, you scrap it and you go to the next one, and you've that mobility, that agility to work between different options to get to that same endpoint is what some will say good strategic thinking is. Others will have a slightly different view of it. You're here talking to me now, so what's your view of it, Piyush?
And it's funny because before you said early stage and later on stage, that's exactly how I was going to answer it. So I invest in a number of companies, and I'm a very hands-on investor. So the first 2 years, we're going to have a call every few weeks, and a lot of it's going to be tactical, right? Let's just kind of get into a flow. What we're doing is packing up for a trip. That's all we're doing for the first 2 years. I'm trying to go, hey, do you want a sweater or shorts? And they're going to go, I don't know. We'll take both of them. Okay, let's figure out where we're going to go. And then after a few years, they quickly figure out, oh, wait a minute, we're going somewhere warm. Why are we carrying all this extra baggage? Exactly. And that's strategy. Where do we want to go? Because without determining where we're going to go, wherever we go is where we're going to go, right? We're going to get somewhere. May not be where we want to go, but we're going to get somewhere, right? And so for me, I look at it as that North Star. Strategy is all about, what are you going to be when you grow up? So if you tell me, I want to be a chef when I grow up, awesome. Should we read science fiction or should we read recipes, right? Should we play in the kitchen or should we go outside and hammer nails? Like, what are we going to do when we grow up? And so when entrepreneurs tell me, I want to own a X number, revenue business that's in this market. Okay, cool. Where are we going to be in 10 years? Then where are we going to be in 5? Let's set some markers. Where are we going to be in 2? Where should we be in 1 year? So what do we need to do this quarter? And what do we need to do this week to get to that 1 year marker, to one day get to that 2 year marker, to one day get to that 10 year marker? And every year we move that 10-year marker out to 10 years. And we ask ourselves, are we still wanting to go on this trip? Right? Are we still going that way? So for Digital Tutors, I'll summarize it for you. In the United States, ESPN is the sports network, right? That's our sports network. Now, you're not going to get the weather. You're not going to get politics. You're not going to get local news. You're going to get sports news. And it's going to be vetted. It's going to be accurate, and it's going to be the best. So for us and Digital Tutors, our 10-year vision was we're going to become the ESPN of our industry. And what that means is we are trusted, we are accurate, we are on time, and we are relevant. We are going to be all the things to our little world to ESPN is to sports. That was our 10-year vision. We're going to be the ESPN of our industry. So people would come to my office and go, Piyush, I've got this awesome idea. Tell me about it. But wait a minute, before you tell me, will it help us become the ESPN? No. Okay, well, should we focus on that? No. So it's as much as what should we pack to what we shouldn't pack, right? We're going on this trip. We don't need to pack a bunch of parkas. We're going somewhere really hot.
That's an incredibly nuanced answer, and I appreciate the detail. One thing that I took from your response there, and please, you can help me unpack this just a little bit. You said we want to be the ESPN in our industry. Now, do you find that I won't say better is not the right word, the more effective entrepreneur looks at some ideas that are out there already and tries to model behaviors to get to something similar? So when you looked at ESPN and you describe what they do, you didn't have to reinvent the wheel because you saw a model there that you said, yeah, I want to be in my industry, something like that. I mean, you're not going to be sportscasting and you're not going to be the final word on sports journalism, but in your sector, you're going to be the best at what you do because you've modeled the intent of what you're doing on something that's been done elsewhere. Do you find that a lot in entrepreneurs, that they look for these ideas out there to get frames of reference, if that's the best way to describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are no new things, right? There are no new inventions. It's just improvements on things. And it's so easy to say, oh, how do I communicate this to 42 full-time employees and 500 contractors all around the world? How do I communicate, hey, we want to be the best. Yeah, everybody else too. Oh, we are going to be accurate. Yeah, I hope so, right? I hope it's not inaccurate. That's really hard to, without just being BS, communicate. But if I tell you, listen, our company, we're the ESPN of our industry. Oh, I get it, right? I get what you stand for. I get what your focus is. We are computer animation and visual effects. We're the ESPN of that industry. Oh, that makes total sense. And that's easy to communicate with employees and with customers. And honestly, my customers should never have to be told we're the ESPN of the industry. They should feel it.
Yeah, and that's where I guess if the strategy at day one is we want to be the ESPN of our industry, that mantra for the customer is they need to feel that we're that. You can tell that to someone till you're blue in the face, and if it's not real for the customer, it's not. You haven't reached a goal, I would have thought. That's mate. Again, we could unpack this for a long time, but I'll get to the last one here, the last statement. Entrepreneurs.
Hold on, before you give me this last one.
Sure.
Let me tell you how that one previous statement, right, of we're going to be the ESPN, how it actually changed my business. So we would release content at the beginning of every month. So every month we'd release 10 or 12 courses in our library of content. And somebody on my team came to me and said, Piyush, I don't think this is being the ESPN. I feel like this is being the archives of the ESPN. ESPN releases relevant content every day. You know what? We should do that. So we went from a once a month release to a daily release. And all we asked for was, how do I get your 15 minutes every morning? How do I become top of mind for you so you start your morning with us? And I think if anybody's in the service industry, it's all about how do I get mind share? How do I hold your mind for 15 minutes every day? I need to produce relevant content for you. So we went from a once a month to a daily. And you talk about a hockey stick. I mean, we went from a business where we needed to touch you 12 times to 365. Like you came to us every day. That's a huge, huge step.
Yeah, and I guess internally would have made for a very different way of operating.
Absolutely. It changed. Now, we did this with no new people, right? So we kept our 42 employees, but we changed the way we work. We built automation, we built systems and tools to make sure we are contacting and talking to the customer every day, just like ESPN.
Entrepreneurs are users of foresight. So foresight as a capability is important to the entrepreneur.
And that would be one of the most important attributes,
No,
or is.
just one of many. And by foresight I mean imagining and looking at possible futures.
I call that delusionism, right? Or delusional behavior. Like we
Right.
all think, I am just so set back when I hear people go, what's in your future? Can you predict what's going to happen? Set the vision for us. And I'm like, do you know how crazy talk this sounds? Right? Like I can actually see the future and this is what it's going to be like, but that's what people want. So you have to have a little bit of that. We're going to make this happen. We're going to build an ESPN out of $54 in a dream. Let's go, guys. And then I somehow convinced 542 people to go along with me, right? So, there is a little bit of cult and culture, and people want to be part of something big. And that goes back to that whole band philosophy we have.
No, I can see where you're coming from on that. The next area, Peach, and this is something that's come up across all the podcasts. Mentoring. It seems that with what you're doing in your travels, particularly with your work with the entrepreneurs organization, that mentoring is something that you put some value in. Is that correct?
It is. It's just having a coach. You are not going to build a world-class football team, rugby team, hockey team. It doesn't matter. Basketball, it doesn't matter. You are not going to be world-class without a coach. And I look at them as Sherpas. I've had some amazing coaches in my life who have just stepped in and said, kid, this is not the way you build a great business. Oh, it's not? Okay, you've done it. Tell me, how do I do that? Now, do I listen? Do I make mistakes? Of course. And then do I regret not listening? Of course, right? I'm a big believer in not paying to have a mentor, right? I think mentors should have kind of an altruistic component to it. Once you start paying your mentor, then it becomes like, hey, how do I keep you on the hook forever? And maybe I'm going to start a mentoring business. And now you're my product, not your success. And it's almost like as long as you stay under my thumb, you're going to constantly need to pay me. And so the way I look at it is I don't really want to mentor anybody unless I invest in you. And now we both have, I'm not going to charge you to mentor you, but we both have a shared interest, right? I want your success and I want you to be successful, so I'm successful.
I have a few more senior people in my industry. I work in the commercial seafood industry in Australia. It's never an official thing. We've never sat down and said this is the mentoring relationship, but there are probably 5 or 6 people across different parts of my industry that I would consider to be mentors. And in addition to that, and again, nothing formal, just someone I can reach out to, pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got this idea, almost be my the person who's going to be the devil's advocate. Do you think this will work? And if it doesn't work, why? And challenge my thinking, even if it pisses me off, challenge me so that I've got my grey matter ticking over. And they do that, and they do that, like you said, without any financial inducement. They want to help because I guess they've got a shared interest in my success. Again, going back to this thing about people wanting to invest in you if you work within the business. And in this context, it's an industry. And then I've got my peer network of other CEOs and people at level that I would also consider mentors, but some would say they're just a network of your peers. They're not really mentoring. I would dispute that and say, yeah, because I can float ideas past them as well, and they won't consider themselves mentors, but they'll go, okay, all right, Eric, this will work and that will work, but I know that these bits won't work, so you need to be thinking about that. And that's often saved me from putting my foot in my mouth, either publicly or amongst my board, to say, hey, you need to consider some of these other things. So in your experience, Piyush, do you find that you've got a peer network that you speak with other entrepreneurs that you can kick around ideas with, but you didn't necessarily target them as a mentor as such?
The Entrepreneurs Organization is that in a nutshell. It is a peer group of other founders. And here's what's interesting, though, is within this organization, we never give advice, right? So think of advice as an opinion and it's unvetted. Oh, I think you should totally do that. Have you ever done that? No, but you should. Okay, well, how do I even know if that works? We only speak from experience. So I can tell you a story of when this worked great for me, and the person next to me would say, well, let me tell you a story when it didn't work great for me. And then you determine from that what your advice is, right?
Right, okay.
So you only get vetted experience share for you to then determine what's best for your path.
I guess that kind of network is critical in your sphere. And why I ask about mentoring is that despite the fact that mentoring as a topic of research and as an area of interest for leaders from all walks of life as being in the public mind for generations, I guess understanding the power of that relationship is important. And the more that I talk to people, the more the formality of it is not the end game. It's whether or not you can set up tactical, critically important conversations that will help you to improve the way that you make a decision or the way that you think. But in the end, you might say to me, okay, Eric, I reckon you should take your business to do X, Y, Z. And you offer me direct advice, I could sit back and go, yeah, okay, thank you very much, and walk away and not do anything. I think couching it in a way that is a story, here is the story and this is what I went through, that lets me unpack what's in that story and go, what's real for me and what's not. Yeah, okay, he makes some sense, or no, I think I can do it, even despite a failure or a story where someone's gone, it didn't work. So did you, just before I leave this particular topic, as you were coming up and you were working after hours while you were a teacher to teach yourself those animation skills, did you have anyone that was mentoring you through that, or was that all yourself? You did that all by yourself? You didn't have a mentor in that space?
Yeah, that was by myself, and it was hard. I was driven by that because I didn't even know where to look, right? And it wasn't until I realized that the animation was just the service, right? The real help I needed was, how do I grow a business? How do I hire people? How much should I charge? Like, I don't know these things. I need to find somebody who's been there, done that, who can kind of put me under their wing and say, all right, let's get you going, right? Again, packing. Do I pack these shorts or this jacket? I needed somebody to help me understand who I want to be when I grow up, right? And I'm just now doing the same thing for others.
Last statement area, and this is, for being honest, more a question here. Are entrepreneurs born or made?
I think there's a mixture.
Okay.
And I've met some that are both, right? I think I was born this way. I mean, I've had a side hustle since the 5th grade. Ever since when my dad in the 4th grade said, we're not buying you an Atari, my side hustle started in the 5th grade. Like everything I can do to earn a few bucks so I can buy my own video game system. That's where it started, right? So if my parents would have given me that Atari, would I have had the drive to say, I'm going to do this on my own? I don't know, right? So clearly there was some environmental factors to learn the hustle, right? And just be okay with figuring it out. My son has grown up in an entrepreneur. His whole life, all he's ever known me is as an entrepreneur, but he's not really an entrepreneur. He's not wired that way. A lot of people are like, Nick, what kind of business are you going to own? And he's like, I kind of want to go to work. And it may be because he's seen, oh man, my mom and dad are working all the time. I don't know if I want to do this. Right?
Yeah.
I want the balance.
Gets back to the fundamental of why do people do what they do in a business, or why do you go to work? Now, I've met very exceptionally bright people that see work as a means to make an income so that they have a lifestyle that they can maintain, and they're quite happy to do that, and they don't want any other pressure in their lives. And I've seen the extreme the other way, where it's all work to the detriment of everything else, to the degree where some people that I've known, very good friends, have impacted their own health because they do nothing but work. And that I think people don't give a lot of attention to the stress that comes with the world of work, and that when you're around family, I think the endorphins kick in and you go into a relaxed mode because you're around people that aren't going to judge you, that aren't going to ask you a million questions, that aren't going to say, hey, can you make me the next ESPN? It's not work-related. And I think that's important. And I haven't had and I will get to getting a copy of your book. But do you talk about that in the book? Do you get to a point in your thinking that having a mental break from what you do is critical to keep you sharp and focused?
I always tell my entrepreneurs that I invest in, when are you going to take a 2-week vacation? And they're just like, oh, bright-eyed. There's no way I could take a 2-week vacation. Are you kidding me? This place would fall apart. And I'm like, no, it will fall apart until you can take a 2-week vacation. And what that means is you finally have built systems and processes, and you've built a team, and you've trusted the team. And I will tell you, if entrepreneurs can just go on a 2-week vacation, they will make more money in that 2 weeks while they're out having fun, right? Than they will just staying in the business. Because what that means is they are not building systems. They are not building processes that can be repeated. They are not building a business. They're just building a product.
I really am thankful for your time, Piyush. This is why I got into this, why I do what I do with this podcasting, is that you can learn from conversations and, all cards on the table. For me, I don't think I'm ever going to be in the world that you're in, but it's fascinating to have the discussion, because when you're talking about leadership, lots of the things that you've brought up, or all of the things that you've brought up, can teach you lessons about how to lead with intention, how to have some sense that it's not all about the work, and that a critical part of the work is the people that you're working with, and this understanding that you can try and achieve a balance and still be successful, I think is anathema to some people, that if you're not investing 24 hours of your day into your business, it's not going to be a success. I think I would argue that if you can't get it to the point that you're talking about, then maybe you're wasting 24 hours of your day because you're not building to something that's going to be self-sustaining, if that's one of the goals. I would assume you don't want to be working on your business 24/7 for the next 20 years. Like, it needs to do its own thing, I would have thought. Is that a fair call?
That's right. You bet.
Okay.
It has to become its own entity.
Agreed. So for those listening, this has been Eric Perez on Talking Leadership. Thank you for joining me for the global edition of the podcast. I've been talking to Piyush Patel. Piyush, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And for those listening, please listen into this podcast. It's one of many that I'm going to be recording around this thing called entrepreneurialism and leadership in general. Thanks again, and I'll catch everyone on the next podcast.